Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Paul Spencer from Play for Keeps Games. Play for Keeps is currently running a Kickstarter for My Favorite Things and the String Railway. Paul, welcome to the binge. How are you doing, sir?
Hey man, yeah, good to join you.
It's great to have you. And I love the background. My gosh, this is like, it's like we're in an episode of The Simpsons or something, right?
Yeah, this was my lockdown background for all my Zoom calls, so I've just kind of maintained it.
Super cool. So we don't know each other. This was kind of a last minute arrangement. So thank you for coming on the podcast. So a lot of my questions are just going to be to try to figure out who you are as a person. So let's just start first. I'm going to get you to shift a little bit to your left just so that we're within the frame. Oh, let's go the other way.
Oh, other way.
The other way. There you go. Perfect. That way
go.
we got you for our TikTok audience as well.
Cool.
Let's start off with, so Play for Keeps Games. There's, I believe, 3 of you that run this company, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we started the company just before lockdown. Great time to start a company. Obviously, we didn't know there was going to be a global pandemic going on, but yeah, it's myself. I take care of all the boring stuff, I like to say. So I do deal with mostly like talking to the manufacturing, talking to fulfillment companies, talking to our accountant, that kind of stuff. And then there's Archie, who does all of our graphic design and has done all the artwork for our game so far. And then we have Anthony, who deals with all the sort of development of the games. He's worked in the industry for ages and knows way more about sort of, thinking in the minds of the gamer way more than I do. So, we've all got our specialisms and we kind of nicely complement each other. Doesn't mean that we always see eye to eye, but certainly it means we've all got something to bring to the table. So that's the plan.
Yeah, often when I talk to people, it's funny. It's all a matter of perspective as to what people find like the fun stuff and what people find the stressful stuff, right? So I imagine in operations, this is probably the fun stuff for you, and probably the not so fun stuff is like the social media and things like that. Is that fair? Or?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I hate marketing. I want to keep as far away from that as possible. Yeah, like my day job is I'm a producer for a video games company. So
Nice.
spreadsheets, roadmaps, that's my jam. If I can fix it with a spreadsheet, I will. So that's kind of where I come in 100%. Yeah, and it's worked out well so far. Certainly, this campaign has done really well for us. Our first game was, just us trying to prove ourselves. We learned a lot of lessons, and I think that's kind of bore fruit with this campaign. So yeah, really happy with how it's gone so far.
Where'd you guys meet? So how did the 3 of you guys initially kind of connect?
Oh well, normally I say that requires a drink to get to that conversation, but I'll let you in. So I mean, it's probably one of those stories that we're a little bit bonded by trauma in some sense. So we all met working for another board game company called Inside the Box, who did Subterra. I don't know if you've heard of that. So we all met there, and we all kind of decided that we really liked each other. We liked working together, but maybe some other structural changes needed to happen at that company. So we all left kind of within the space of sort of 6 months to a year of each other, that company. And it took us a few years to kind of regroup, come back together. And that's where we all met. We all kind of appreciated what we could bring to the table. And we all thought, yeah, we can work together. So let's give it a go. Let's go for it. Certainly lessons have been learned along the way about, some assumptions about going into that, or maybe we should have done a bit more planning beforehand, but those are lessons you learn. And like, I to some degree, we're actually just being 3 of us, that for a lot of board game companies, they are just like one man bands.
Yep.
So even just 3 of us is more than most companies at this stage, even though obviously we're not like earning any money from it as yet.
Yeah.
It's still a case of like, we're still bigger than a lot of people in that respect, which is a little bit odd, but it also means that like, generally that tension, hashing things out. I'm certainly one strong believer in like, my idea is never the best. It's stronger by presenting that idea to the group, getting feedback, iterating on it. So I'm 100% like for that. And I think that's how we do end up with our best ideas and get things to the stage that they are. We have iterated on so much stuff, like little things you wouldn't even really notice. But like things that we had like massive discussions about like icon sizes, icon shapes, all this kind of stuff that, you know, if you're a player, you don't notice it because we got it right. And it takes, you know, some of that stuff can have like be long ongoing conversations that take months to resolve, and you realize, oh, it was just like this simple thing that we didn't think of initially. But yeah, it's that's sorry, I've kind of
That's
really
okay.
got a
No, I
piece.
imagine there's like a bit of a shorthand you guys would establish from your prior relationship as well, right? And I think that would probably be a massive asset coming in to just say, okay, I know kind of the strengths and weaknesses of each of these players in this, and you know, knowing that going in and not having to figure that out is, I would say, a plus. That's a huge plus, right? So, and you talk about like icons and things like that. What I find amazing is sometimes I'll be talking with a colleague of mine about something like that, about like a maybe an icon or a certain shape or just the way something's presenting on a page. And what I always find cool is when they explain the why is this important. You know, like it could be something that 99% of the people aren't even going to notice, right? They're not even going to care. Like it's going to go over their head. But the 1%, including the person that's doing it, there's a reason why you do it, right? And getting into those kind of nuances I kind of geek out over those conversations because I like to learn as much as I can, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's kind of been a bit of a like ethos as we've grown and learned working with each other. We've kind of honed in on like what we're trying to achieve as a company, and like a lot of that is to kind of try and buck some of the trends in like modern gaming that have become a bit of tropes. Like, hey, we're on Kickstarter, here's a giant box that's like $200 with hundreds of minis, and like you know, the box is full of air. Like we're trying to like really go counter to that, and like our games focus on like interactivity with players, you know, something that's deemed almost like old school. Like some games are a bit vicious, like but not in a kind of like take that way, in a kind of like, oh, if I do this move, this will impact other players like positively or negatively. Like that interaction is like really important to us. And yeah, like I say, like trying to buck those trends. So like we don't do like, you know, just extra miniature stretch goal kind of thing. We're kind of like focused on like what actually adds value to the game, keeps that game like fresh for longer for people. You know, things that, you know, really what we want is we want to create games that have a life past Kickstarter. And in a way, we're quite old school with that. Like we're using Kickstarter because we don't have the funds to manufacture these things. Yes, it's partly a marketing thing, but also like we genuinely need your money. So like if we don't get it, these things do not happen. And we want these things to happen because, you know, particularly with the new games, like these are licenses that we got. Like we think these are games that people will enjoy. And, you know, that's built into the brand name, right? Like play for keeps. Like we want you to keep these games. We don't want you to like buy this $200 box that you have for like 6 months on your shelf. Don't play it, get rid of it. Like we want you to have games that you keep in your bag, that you show your friends, that you play with people, and like they have a really good time. And, you know, that's something I always enjoy about games is that, you know, sometimes it's not in the game you have the conversation, but it's afterwards you talk about it and you're like, oh, do you remember when this thing happened? Like, that was crazy. Like, oh, that was so good. Can't wait to play that game again. That's the kind of experience we want you to have. And I know that might sound a bit like lofty and like abstract, but like I think that's something that like there's a pure joy of board gaming about just sitting around a table with a group of friends and just like experiencing something for the first time, and then something wild happening that, you know, wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been playing this game. Like this game has provided you that access, that opportunity. Like I always think this is how I justify board gaming to myself, is like, you know, I'm a massive like impulse purchaser. Like that's the joke. That's the joke with my board gaming friends, is that like I'll get suckered in by like an IP or something that's flashy. But like the way I justify board gaming and my spending on board gaming is, you know, studies have shown that like money spent on experiences is way more rewarding than money spent just on like objects. But I'm like, board games are both. So like I have something cool, but also like we can experience this, and we can like that value proposition of like I've spent $20-30 on a game that I've had like hours and hours of fun with. Like where else can you get that value proposition? Like that's so good to me. Like I really appreciate that. And like certainly like price point is something we're really conscious of. Like box size is something we're really conscious of. You know, components is something we're really conscious of. Like we want to make sure that, like I say, we're adding function, thinking of the gameplay experience first. We don't want to like do anything that actually makes the game harder to play. Because there's
Yeah.
so many games these days that I've played where like you think, oh, actually, why have they made this decision? I don't fully understand it. Going back to what you were saying about like understanding the why, like sometimes like we've played games where we've just questioned like, why did they make this decision? This doesn't seem to make sense to us. Like
Yeah.
this doesn't actually add value. This takes away from the experience. They've made something more difficult, like less intuitive than it could have been if it was like stripped back a bit, more simple, more refined. Like, you know, I'm a big like Nintendo fan, like, you know, Mario, stuff like that. That's like, I mean, it's easier said than done. This is what my boss always says. It's like, you know, easy to play, difficult to master is like hard to achieve, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like it sounds so simple, but it's like taking stuff away can be just as important, if not more important, than adding stuff.
Oh yeah.
And like that's a really hard lesson to learn. And like, you know, that will so depend on like what the product is that you're trying to make, what the game is that you're trying to make. Like, I think that's the important like lens I always try to put on as well, is like think about the product. Don't just think about like the game. Oh, this would be cool for this game. Yeah, but like as a product decision, does it make sense? Is this something that people are going to like vibe with long term?
Well, there's two things I want to jump in there on. One is it sounds like you guys have a very good handle on what company you want to be and the types of products that you make. And I think that's so important for um, publishers or even new game designers who are maybe launching their first game, is to just take a step back and say, okay, what is it that I want to create on as a whole across my portfolio? What do I stand for as a company? And because that will help you later on really with that filter of, okay, you want to do everything, right? Because I think most board gamers just, I mean, you get excited by everything around you, so it's like, I want to do it all, but you got to be able to cut it somewhere, right? And I started doing this even as a company and going to game conventions where I would have designers come up to me and say, hey, are you taking submissions? And I'd say, yes, but here's the criteria of what we stand for as a company, right? So that's our first filter. And it doesn't matter if this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. If it doesn't fit kind of the tenets that we've established as a company, I'll have to refer you to somebody else, and I'll be a backer. I'll be one of the first ones to buy it, but it's got to fit within our current portfolio, because I need to know that when people are backing my games and I'm trying to bring that audience over from game to game, they know what to expect, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing you mentioned, I think, which is important, is that this idea of stripping things out, right? And I'm a big fan of this. And we're working on a few games with some colleagues and some designers, and we often have this discussion where the tendencies for the designer to want to put more in, right? So let me add more. I think I can make this even more detailed. I think we can make it even more nuanced. And I always kind of defer back to, no, we got to peel it back. I want to know, what is the core of this game? What is the one or two things that I got to do? Three things tops I got to do in this game. We got to polish and nail that first, and then we can kind of build up and add more kind of icing to the cake afterwards. But if the cake itself isn't solid, we're going to have a mess at the end of the day, right? So those are kind of the two things I just want to kind of tag in on those two comments. So with this particular campaign that you're running, it is very interesting. Congrats. I mean, you guys are funding very, very well. I'm going to get into it, so I'm going to show the page that people are watching in a second. But the first game you launched was a game you guys created, right? And now you've made this shift to now publishing other titles and doing reprints and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about that decision and why you guys went in that direction?
Yeah, so I won't give you the full long version. We'll go for the medium version. But essentially, when we first got together, what we thought was like, we're a talented group. Let's make a game by ourselves. Like, that'll be easy, right? We can do that. We'll nail that. So we spent a year doing that. And then we kind of sat down one day and we realized this game that we're working on isn't very fun. Like, we haven't made something that's that interesting. It's called Bizarre Bazaar. We had like a few iterations that we took to like conventions, and like we didn't really get any buzz. People kind of were okay with it, but like it was kind of like a riff on Fantasy Realms. If you've played Fantasy Realms, that was the idea, and we were trying to like kind of take it a little step up, but essentially we still wanted to do something that was like, for our first project, that was like simple, easy to manufacture, that we could just kind of prove ourselves with. So we kind of sat down and we thought, like, this isn't working. What do we do? And we were like, well, we want to be a publisher, so why aren't we looking for designs? And I used to go to in London, Playtest UK,
Mm-hmm.
set up by a guy called Rob, really great network of people. And through that, we knew this guy called Mandela, and he had a published game called Glasgow. And Mandela loves making really, really tiny games. And I'm talking like tiny games that like fit into small, super small boxes. And one of the ones he presented to us was Vidimus, which is a game about making a stained glass window. And we liked it. So we signed it, and we thought, hey, this is perfect for us. This is, it's just a deck of cards. This will be, super easy to do. We're not expecting to make like millions or whatever, but like this is something we think is like achievable. Help build some confidence, some trust in us, right? We're unknowns to like the Kickstarter audience, because that's always what we've got in make this successful on Kickstarter. Like we have to do that because we're starting from nothing, and like that was the journey we had to go on. So we did Overstocked. That happened during the pandemic. Basically the worst time you could think to launch a small card game on Kickstarter, because paper prices went through the roof, shipping was through the roof, doing small games not very viable commercially. Like it didn't make us any money, but we learned a lot from it. And like ultimately, like we're still really proud of that game. Like it's a really great game. People that have played it, like pretty much everyone that sits down to play it goes like, oh, this was great, I had a great time, can I buy it? Yes. So we did that, and we thought, post that campaign, we had to really look deeply at ourselves and go like, okay, how do we make our next game, our next Kickstarter successful? Because ultimately, like myself, I have a full-time job, the other guys are freelance doing all their bits and bobs, right? Like we all need to have an income, and we couldn't keep putting in money to this company to keep it going. Being really super candid with you, right? Like this is the reality of this. We've seen so many companies fall away like in board games because like people are like trying to run a business and like don't have like all that knowledge, but like they've made it their full-time job, and like it's super stressful, and there's one of them, and it's like I find us like I think we're quite lucky in some respects that like we do have other jobs, and that we are learning from other industries, and that when we come to do this is kind of our side project, our kind of hustle, and like maybe one day it does become the main thing. But like certainly going into this project, going into My Favorite Things and Stream Railway, what we were looking for was we want to make this company successful long term. We want to be able to fund the next project from this project. How do we achieve that? We want to look at games that have an inbuilt audience, right? Like it was really hard for us, and we had to let a couple people down, right? Like we had signed original games, and we had to let those people down and say, look, we don't think we're the right fit for this. We're sorry. We've like spent some time on this. We've been trying to like develop it, think about it, that sort of stuff, and we realized like ultimately from our position as like a new publisher, it's so much harder for us to do something that we're trying to achieve. Like I say, trying to buck those Kickstarter trends. We're not trying to do big box of minis. We're trying to do interesting, interactive, old school kind of games in a way.
Yeah.
Though it's so much harder to make those viable on Kickstarter. So we had to let a couple of people down and go like, we don't think we're the right publisher for this. Like we've signed your game. We're sorry. Have all the rights back. Like, that we're going to try and pursue this thing. And like, it was just like a casual conversation of like, hey, maybe do you think we could like try and get the rights for some old games and maybe like see if there's still interest for them? And it just so happened like this off chance email that we'd sent, like so much luck is involved in this stuff as well. Like an email going through the ether through BGG, like suddenly, oh yeah, interested in you can have the rights for this. Like, yeah, sure, no worries. And just a quick conversation in one respect gets we had the rights for My Favorite Things quite early on, and we were like, I was still very worried again from like that boring operational product perspective. Is that one game enough? And like one small game, we already know from our past experience isn't good for Kickstarter. So we need something else to complement that.
Why isn't it good for Kickstarter? It is. I want for our audience so they know.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, like partly. I mean, I will say like for us, the biggest impact. We're UK based. Biggest impact for us, shipping. Shipping is killer. Yeah. And like if you take for example our game Overstocked, right? Overstocked is like this big, and it's like we charged £16, like it's $20, something like that, for that game. To ship that game probably costs about the same amount.
Yep.
And no one wants to play that. Like the hard fact is, like, if I tell you this is $30 plus $5 shipping, or if I tell you this is $35 and free shipping, which option are you going to choose?
Yeah.
Right. There's a psychological thing there. People are always going to go for that free shipping. And partly that's like Amazon, right? Amazon has created that problem where like people expect next day shipping and free. And like Amazon are able to take that hit, right? They're able to just absorb that cost. But like for a small company like us, like that is crushing. And, so we're subsidizing shipping. Like we make it clear on all our campaigns, we're subsidizing shipping, but it's still expensive. And like, again, this is why, we were having this conversation even just, post launch of this campaign where we'd already been successful. We'd made more in this, our new campaign in the first 2 hours than we ever did in our entire first campaign.
Yeah.
And then we were still looking at the numbers going, I don't know if we're going to make it.
Yeah.
Right. Because
it's crazy. Because even beyond the shipping, if you look at the acquisition cost, right? So if you're going to do any marketing at all, which is usually
Facebook I haven't even included any of that. Yeah. 100%.
So the numbers, so people know, like you're looking at anywhere from $17 to $22 per backer, right? In marketing costs. By the time people are like, oh, your ad shouldn't cost that much. Well, say your ad costs $2 by the time they're going and they're signing up to your page to say, yeah, I want to be notified when this launches. Okay, but then only 1 in every 10 of those people actually fall through to the end of the campaign to, put their credit card down and buy the game. Look at that math. That's $17 to $22 acquisition cost. So when you start adding, say $20 to keep it clean, add another $20 shipping on top of that, that's $40. Then your manufacturing costs, say $10, $15. You're looking at $55 on the game before you've made any money at all, right? So it's these small box games are absolute killers when it comes to the economics on Kickstarter. And unless you can do such massive quantities, then it makes sense. But again, that's like a 1 in a million kind of thing where you're going to have a campaign that's going to do like $1 million on a small box game, right?
Yeah, 100%. Don't get me wrong. Like there are people doing like really innovative stuff, right? Like there are the guys, the postmark guys who are doing like $1, £1, whatever it is for like, a print at home, roll and write. Yeah. Amazing. Ingenious, like so clever. They've made a load of money, but like
games too.
Yeah,
I've backed some of them.
But like that's not including like they still have to design those things. They still have to do the art for them, the graphic design, all that sort of stuff. Like that's all sunk cost before you've got to that point, right? Like I've spoken to people at playtests and things like that who like they're like, oh, I just want to I want to make my own game, I want to publish it, blah blah blah. I'm like, be prepared to sink a load of money into it and it not get a return. Like if you just want to do this for fun, great, that's awesome. Like do that, please do that, because it won't cost you everything. But like if you want to try and make like a business function, you have to look at the numbers really hard. And like certainly going into this campaign, we were like, we need this to be a success, otherwise we can't really continue. And like that's the brutal truth of it, that's the reality of it. And we didn't want to be in the position like other companies where like throwing no shade, this is just a thing that happens, right? The realities of like particularly during lockdowns, things like that, like companies had done a Kickstarter, ran a Kickstarter, got some funding, 4x, people had paid shipping 4x. Now this is costing so much more, like 3 times as much. Fortunately, like that for us, like that's gone down now, but like certainly at its peak, like that was horrific, like trying to ship stuff and everything like that. Like, and like ultimately, like that's your bottom line right there. That's you not just like making a bit of profit, like, oh, this assuming it's going to be profitable. It's no. That's you trying to make the next thing, trying to like keep the company afloat. Just existing costs money, right? Like going to conventions. Hey, people are wearing t-shirts. That's money. People want food. That's money. Like everything you do costs money as a business. And I don't really, I'm trying to not make this sound like super boring and like
not doom and gloom, but well, here's the positive is let's talk about this campaign. Cause I mean, if I'm going to put this in Canadian dollars, cause it's the only way I can see it. But you're at like $99,256. You're almost at $100,000 here in Canadian dollars.
Oh, well, that sounds amazing. Let's keep on Canadian dollars.
Yeah, exactly. You're over 1,585 backers. You got 52 hours to go. So congrats on that. I mean, you guys got to be very happy with the funding you've got so far, and we're entering that kind of back end hockey stick. So those numbers are now just going to like shoot up in the last 48 hours. For those who don't know about these two games, can you give us a quick overview of My Favorite Things, and then follow that with an overview of String Railway?
Yeah, 100%. So, My Favorite Things is a trick-taking party game. So, originally by a Japanese designer, it was only like available at Essen for like 1 year in like 2018, no, maybe before that, 2015, something like that. And essentially, what you do is you have a set of cards, number 1 to 5, and then one that's like a 0, or in our case, like a broken heart. And the idea is you write a category of something you want someone to rank. So, for example, it might be favorite Lord of the Rings characters, or favorite TV shows, whatever. So you write that on your one card, you hand over all the other cards to the player to your left. They then write down like their favorite TV shows. So like number 1 is like Game of Thrones, number 2 is something else.
Yeah.
And then on that broken heart, that 0, they write one they don't like. And then you don't see the numbers that they've assigned to those. You get those cards back, and then everyone will have done the same. So everyone else will have a different category. So you'll have things like comparing, like, I don't know, favorite TV shows to favorite actors, to favorite video games, to favorite like board games, whatever it is. And everyone has this like list of stuff that is in a hand of cards, and then you're playing tricks. So you're trying to win the tricks with that lowest number. So the lowest number being like the top ranked one. And then the trump is actually the broken heart. So that's how you can like beat the one, is with that trump, with that broken heart. So it's like super interactive, super funny, like really great way to like get to know people. Like we've opened up a poll on the Kickstarter, a little survey to like get more category suggestions from people.
Yeah.
Because it is completely freeform. You can write whatever you want, but like people sometimes need a bit of a hand in like what's a good example. So like, some of the really spicy ones are like, people at this table, just rank them. Your exes, rank them.
Karen is the worst. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then so you play 2 rounds. You go once to the left, once to the right, and for each trick you win, you get a little heart, and whoever has the most hearts wins. So yeah, super interactive, really great.
It's a fun party game.
Yeah, 100%. So that's my favorite thing. My favorite things. String Railway Collection is actually 2 games. So both designed by Hisashi Hayashi. The first one is String Railway, which is perhaps a bit better known. It used to come in like a long box, and an Asmodeated version of it. And they tried to make it like very Japanese themed. So it was all bullet trains and like Japanese train stations. But it kind of doesn't really fit the vibe of the game, because like you're making train lines with string. So like it feels more like old school kind of like chug chug chug, I think I can, I know I can sort of trains, as opposed to bullet trains. So we've kind of like taken the artwork to that sort of place of making it like a bit more rural and sort of homely. The game's super simple. You're just drawing a station, putting it down, connecting with string. All the stations like score differently, so you get different points depending on where the station is, depending on how many stations you connect with your string, that kind of thing. So that's super great gateway game. Super, like, people get it instantly because it's like so intuitive, and again super interactive, because it's like where you place your string is super essential, because you're using the table space as your world. So like, I'm going to put this string right over here in front of you. Now you're blocked in, essentially. So you have to either try and circumvent them, or you go over them. But if you go over another string, you lose a point. So there's like, this fun dynamic of like your points are changing dynamically, like round to round.
And then the other game that's included within that, this String Railway Cube. So what's that about?
Yeah, so String Railway Cube was originally called String Railway Transport, and it takes the same sort of core components. So it's string and tiles, which are stations, but the difference is this game is more of a set collection, pick up and deliver. So stations will have different cubes on them, and you're trying to deliver those cubes via your string. So it's then about creating like a super efficient network of like, okay, I need to get this cube from here, and then to here, and then to here, and then I want to get this cube over here to here to here to here. So it's super brain burny. Like, it's much more of like a step up in like complexity. I'm terrible at it. But again, super interactive, and just like really steps up that challenge and that. So, when all this essentially added to some degree is cubes and some different stations. But yeah, so we thought String Railway Cubes as transport hadn't been as successful as String Railway, and sort of Tom Vassel's take was, both of these games are really good, but you don't really need to own both. So we've gone, well, now you can, because we put both in the same box. So, depending on that group, right? Like, it's a great gateway game, and then you take that same gateway game to your friends who are like, oh, we're kind of maybe getting into some more difficult games now. We're kind of going up that curve, getting into board games a bit more. Well, okay, now you've still got this other game that you haven't even explored, which does ramp up that difficulty, that complexity that gives you for both kind of those different kinds of friendship groups, which is something I always find that with my friendship groups is that I have so many friends who are not really into board games, so I introduce to them the really gateway stuff, the really approachable stuff, and then I have that other group who are super hardcore, won't play half the games that I want to play because they've already played it and they've already dismissed it as boring or whatever. So this game kind of fits those two dynamics, which is super great.
So what do you guys like? So now you're publishers, you're now in the publishing game. What comes next for you guys? Are you still taking submissions? Are you still pulling some of these earlier designs you're working on forward, or kind of what's the plan?
Yeah, so essentially what we want to keep doing is keep going on this trajectory. We want to go bigger, bolder, better. So what we're hoping to do is get some other games, again, sort of past gems that maybe have fallen out of favor that there's still interest in, and kind of bring them up to date, give them a new coat of paint. I can't really talk too much about exactly what games we're going for, but we certainly do have some that we're eyeing up, and we're always playing some old games and scouring BGG for lists of hey, what games are people interested in the reprint of? And we're not going to be the restoration game sort of end of it, right? We're not going to be blowing these things up to these massive boxes and stuff, but we're going to be trying to keep those games that was maybe didn't underappreciate, didn't quite get its time to shine because it looked like garbage or whatever, and actually trying to give it a really good coat of paint and say hey, actually this game is super interesting and super fun and has maybe been a bit overlooked, and now let's give it a second chance, and hopefully that resonates with people.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, for those who want to check out this campaign, you are entering your last 48 hours. I'm going to put a link in the show notes so people can find it really easily. Or if you just go on Kickstarter and you search Play for Keeps is probably the easiest thing to search for to find. That's the easiest way I found you guys. Check out the campaign. Looks super awesome. Paul, I can't wait to see where this ends up. I want to wish you all the best in this coming year.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No worries. Take care. You cheers. Bye. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.